Hello everyone. In this video, we'll see what is DynamoDB and how it works. So first of all, what is DynamoDB? Well, DynamoDB is a schemaless database. What schemaless means is that we don't need to define the schema of the table. There are no columns, there are no foreign keys and no relationships like we have in SQL Server DB or MySQL DB. In DynamoDB, we just need to define a primary key, a partition key, what they call it. And against that key, we can store any type of data. Okay, so to open a DynamoDB, if you already have opened it, you can click recently visited hyperlink, or you can search here DynamoDB and you can click on it. And in the tables, currently there are no tables, so let's create one. Let's name it test table, and in the name you can use letters, numbers, underscore, hyphens, and period. After that, we need to define a primary key or partition key. Why they call it a partition key, I will explain it later, but you just consider this a primary key. Okay, for example, we are going to store the data of some persons in this table, and their ID will be the partition key. So I'll name it person ID, and its type would be string. I can also select number or binary, but I will prefer string. Sort key I will explain later in this lecture, and let's just create this table with all these default settings. Okay, our table has been created. Let's click this table. And here we have some general information about this table. Partition key, sort key, currently we have not defined it, but we will define it later. Capacity mode, currently it is on demand by default, but we can change it. This is related to reading and writing capacity for the records. And the table status is active. Currently there are no items, and table size is 0 bytes, and many other properties which we will learn later in this lecture. And we just go to explore table items. Currently there are no items, and let's insert some records or create item. Okay, the first attribute is person ID, which is the primary key or the partition key, and we must provide it. For example, 1 2 3 4, and then we can add as much attributes as we want. So add a new attribute, and the type of this attribute will be string, full name, and then let's say John Doe. Add another attribute, and its type, let's say it is number, and this is age 30, and a few more attributes. And let's create this new item. Okay, so we have inserted a new record in it. Now I'm going to put some more records in it. Okay, so I have entered 5 records. When I need to fetch them, I just need to click on this run button. Okay, now there are 2 ways to fetch records from this table. One is the scan operation. It is already selected, and when we click run, it will fetch all the records from a table. But this operation is very expensive, because this way it will start reading from the first record and it will go to the last record. In the result, you can see the status has been completed, and it returned 5 items and it consumed 2 units. And this is RCU, means read capacity units. So what are these units? Basically, whenever you insert a new record in DynamoDB or you fetch a record from it, it consumes some units, and they will charge you against the units you have consumed. And normally we don't apply this method. We usually use query, because query is not expensive, and this way we'll fetch only the relevant record. So by using query, we can fetch any record by providing the partition key. or the primary key, you can say. Like if I want to fetch only this record 1, 2, 3, 4, in here in the partition key I will provide the value 1, 2, 3, 4, and if I click run, it will only fetch this particular record. And notice that it consumed only 0.5 half a unit. So this operation is not expensive. Okay, if we talk about the filters, let's say we got more than one record and still we need to filter some of the records from the result, then we can apply filters like city equals to data type of the attribute is string and the value is New York, and then it will filter from the results the persons who are living in New York City. But currently we only have one record, so you cannot see any difference. But later in this lecture, we will add some more records and then I will show you how to apply these filters. But one thing here, why do we have this data type string? Because we already have mentioned the attribute name city, but why do we need to select the type? Because there could be two attributes where the attribute name is same but their data type is different. Yes, we can store this kind of value in this DynamoDB. Okay, let's add some more records in it and also some complex records, and then we'll see how it works. And for that we'll go to create item. Okay, these attributes are the same, but let's create a new type of attribute, and here we select a string set. In a string set, we can insert multiple strings. It is like an array of strings. First, I need to provide attribute name, skills, AWS, Lambda, DynamoDB. Okay, now let's create another complex type, list, and we name it hobbies. Here we can add a new value of string type, reading, another value, traveling. Okay, difference between the string set and the list is that in the list we can add any other type of value, like I can add a number in the list. For example, I write here this number, and then we create another attribute of type map. This is also a complex type, and map is like an object. So we name it address, and in the map data type we can insert key value pairs. For example, we select a string, street 22 West Avenue, another string, city Chicago, and another string, country USA. Let's save this, and I will select scan so that we can see all the records, but remove this filter and run. Okay, so you can see now that in the first 5 records there is no address attribute, and on the 6th record we have this attribute. If I expand it, so you can see this is an object. The key of the first pair is city and its value is Chicago, which is string type. The second key is country and its value is string type, and the third key is street and its value is also a string type. And if we see the hobbies, you can see it's a list of 3 values. The first one is a string type, the second one is also a string type, but the third value is a number type. And if we talk about the skills, it is a list of strings. So as you can see, there are 3 values, all are strings. And as you can see that while inserting the values in this table, I just need to provide the person ID, and that must be a string. And after that, I can insert any kind of data in this table. So this is what I meant when I told you that it is a schemaless database. We just need to define a primary key or a partition key, and against that we can store any type of data. But why do we call it a partition key? Why don't we just call it a primary key? This is because this key is pointing to a partition where these values are stored. To understand this better, I show you a diagram. Okay, so this is our partition key like we have here, and every key is pointing to a new partition where our attributes, these attributes are located. So one partition key is pointing to this partition, the second one is pointing to this one, and we can have different type of attributes in these partitions. So it is not necessary that we need to store the same type of attributes in this partition and also in this one and also in this one. No, it's not like that. Because in traditional databases like where we have columns, we just need to store only those type of values which columns we already have defined in the table of the schema. So this is schemaless database. We just need to take care of the partition key and then we can store any type of value. And that's why we call this a partition key. Okay, now let's create another table with a partition key and a sort key. So we go to tables and we create a new table and we name it test table 2, and then we need to define a partition key and a sort key. But what is a sort key? Sort key actually is a part of the primary key. Sometimes we just have the partition key and it must be unique, and sometimes we have partition key and the sort key, and the combination of these two keys must be unique. So in simple words, sometimes only the partition key is the primary key, and sometimes the combination of partition key and the sort key is the primary key. Okay, now let me tell you how it works, and then we will talk about it, that why do we need a sort key. But first, how it works. Actually, in the partition key, we only have one operator, and that is the equal operator. What I mean that you need to provide a value which is equal to this partition key, and it will fetch the relevant record from the table. But in the sort key, we can have different operators like equals, not equals, starting with, contains. So we have these kind of operators. And one more thing, DynamoDB is a NoSQL database. Like we don't have SQL queries like select asterisk from table where column name is equal to this value or something like that. No, there is no SQL in DynamoDB. Okay, now to create a table with a partition key and a sort key, let's imagine a scenario of a clinic where people come for the checkup. Now, the same person can have multiple visits on different dates. So in this scenario, in the partition key, we can have person ID as the partition key, and in the sort key, we can have visit date. Dates are stored as a string in DynamoDB. So in this case, when we need to query, we need to provide the person ID, and after that if we provide sort key is not a must to provide. So if we don't provide the sort key, it will show you all the records where the person ID is whatever you provide the value. But if you also provide the sort key, it will fetch all those relevant records which meet the criteria. Now if you want all the persons who visit on a specific date, you cannot query that. So you need to design your table and provide here visit date, and in the sort key you need to provide person ID. Now in this case you just need to provide a date, and if you don't provide a sort key, it will show you all the records where the visit date is the provided value. So whatever the scenario you have in your mind that how would you query the table normally, you need to create a partition key and the sort key. Later we can define indexes and then we can query on some other attributes. I will tell you how to do that. So now if I can tell you what kind of data we can store in our primary key. So this is our partition key, visit date, and our sort key, person ID. Now for example, on 1st of January 2026, a person with the ID 1234 visited the clinic. So these all are valid primary keys because even I am repeating the values in visit date and also in person ID field, their combination is unique. But if I try to insert a value like 3rd of January 2026, the same person 1234 visited the clinic, then I cannot enter this value because this combination already exists here. So in this case, if I try to insert this value, it will override the existing value or it will generate an error if we already have configured it in our query to insert the value. Okay, now let's go back to DynamoDB and let's create this table. Our table has been created. Now let's click on this, and currently there are no values, but let me insert some values. Okay, I have entered some records in the table, and before I sort them, you can notice that there are no sorting. When you insert a new record, it can store it anywhere in the table. And when you try to fetch the records, there is no sorting. Okay, now let's sort the records as per person ID. And here you can notice that this person, Mia Robinson, it has 4 records visited in different dates. And the same way, James Wilson also has 4 records visited in different dates. So as I told you that the combination of one record must be unique. And this was the scan operation, and now let's talk about the query. And in the query we can provide the partition key, that is visit date, let's say 1st of January, and in the date you have noticed that we have inserted date like year, month and day. So 2026 0101, and if we fetch the records, so these are all the records visited on 1st of January. And as I mentioned that even if we don't provide anything in the sort key, it will fetch all the records which are equals to this partition key. And also there is no any other operator instead of equals operator. But in the sort key we have different operators like equals to, less than, greater than, between, begins with. So let's just use this operator, begins with, and we provide here 200. Let's fetch the records. Okay, so you can see all the records where the date is this value and the sort key begins with 200. And also if you have noticed, it consumed less read capacity units. Okay, now let's filter the records. Country equals to UK. Okay, so now we have got only 2 records. Now one thing you need to keep in mind that filtration does not mean that you are consuming less units. Actually filtration applies on the result you already have fetched by providing partition key and also the sort key. For example, you provide partition key and the sort key and you get 100 records and you consume 10 units. And after that you also apply filters and then you get only 5 records. So it will still use 10 units, but it will show you the filtered records. Like it will show you only 5 records, but still use 10 read capacity units. Okay, now as you can see that I can fetch all the records by providing the visit date, and it will show all the records where the visit date, whatever the value I provide here. But what if I want to fetch all the records where the provided value is the person ID? Like if I want to fetch all the records where the person ID is 2001. Although I have 4 records of this person, James Wilson, but still when I provide here 2001 in the sort key, it will show me only 1 record, because in this date, this person visited only once. So fetching all the records of a person in different dates is not an option. Now there is another solution, and that is we can define an index. So let's go to table details, and in the indexes, currently you can see there is no any index, but we are going to create one, and we name it persons index. And the same way we define partition key and the sort key, here we will say the partition key is now person ID and the sort key is visit date. Now scroll down. The index capacity is the maximum units it can consume in a second for the read and write operation. If you want to increase or decrease, you can set the value here, but I will go with the default option, which is it will get the settings from the base table. And then warm throughput is actually to increase read and write capacity units when there are a lot of requests, so there won't be any delay. This is related to the advanced topics. You need to monitor that how many requests you get in the peak events, and then you can increase the capacity units for reading and writing operations. But currently we'll go with the default values, and the attribute projection is actually what in the result you want to see. You want to see all the attributes, or you want to see only the keys. The keys are here what you have provided. So the third option is the keys that you already have mentioned here in the partition key and the sort key, and other attributes whatever you want, like age and city only, so you can mention here, but we'll show all the attributes. Okay, let's create this index. Will take some time. Okay, our index has been created and its status is active. And now let's go to explore table items. And now if I go here, select this index, and now I have the option to fetch all the records by providing person ID. So let's enter 2001, and you can see that the person with the ID 2001 visited 4 times in different dates. And this is how we can create indexes and utilize them to fetch the records. Okay, now the question is, why do we need sort key? Actually, in DynamoDB, there are no relations, there are no joins between the tables. And what we do, we store the data of 2 or more tables in one table. And the ID of the master table we set as the partition key, and the IDs of the child tables we use them as the sort keys. I'll give you an example here in Excel. Let's create a new sheet here, and let me insert some data in it, and then I show you. Okay, now we have 3 tables here, one for the customers and second table for the orders, and the third table the items they ordered. And we can track the data by primary key and then the foreign key in the child table and this primary key as a foreign key in this child table. But in DynamoDB, because we don't have relations, so we need to put all this data in one table and we put data in this format. Okay, so this is how we'll store the data of these three tables in one DynamoDB table. And now if I want to fetch the profile data of customer 1, I will provide here in the primary key the partition key cust1, and in the sort key I will provide profile and I will get this record. Now if I want to get the information of this order 1 when it was placed, so I will put here in the sort key order number ORD1. So this way I will get only this record. And if I want to get all the items in order 1, so I will provide here order number ORD1 and item, but I will use the operator begins with. So this way I will get these two records. And if I don't provide anything in sort key, then I will get all these records. It is a complex example, not very complex, but I want you to have the idea that how it works, and you will need it when you will be working in DynamoDB. And we also have another attribute here which will tell us that this is a customer or an order or the items of the order. So this we can use in filters, or we can also utilize it in creating the indexes on this table. Okay, now let's go back to DynamoDB and talk about another feature, TTL or time to live. So we go to table details. This feature auto delete the records from DynamoDB on a specific date and time. Actually, there are millions of records in DynamoDB, and we can also set up a job like a Lambda function to auto delete the records from DynamoDB, but there is a built-in feature in it. It will delete all the records which are set up to delete on a specific date and time. And how it works, let me tell you. First of all, we turn this feature on, and then we need to mention an attribute name that the DynamoDB will look for to delete a record. So we can name this like TTL or expires at, whatever the name you like. And then in this attribute, we'll provide a date and time in epoch format. And when the time is up, it will auto delete that record. So let's just turn on TTL, go to explore table items, and then let's create a new item. And let's add another attribute of number type, and we name it expires at, and in here we provide this value. This is actually 1st of February 2026, and the time is 0 hours, 0 minutes and 0 seconds in epoch format. So let's just create this item. Okay, and we can see here this record is going to expire on this date and time. So all other records where there is no TTL, they are not going to expire. They are permanent here unless you delete them, but this record will be deleted. So now let's go back to table properties again. Okay, deletion protection, you can turn it on, and It will not let you delete the table until you turn it off again. And the encryption, we'll talk about it in the next lecture when we will see what are the AWS key management service. Read and write capacity, I already have talked about it, that you can set the maximum number of units for the read and write operation, or you can also set here, you can provide here whatever the value from 1 to 40,000 for the read operation and the write operation, but they will charge you accordingly. In general information, the item count is not real time. It takes some time to update. It can take a few hours. I guess we have covered almost all of the topics of DynamoDB. A few advanced topics remaining, which we will cover in the next video. And hope you like the video, and thanks for watching.